The film begins in 1898, introducing us to a prospector named Daniel Plainview. He is engaged in the laborious task of mining a vein of potentially valuable ore from a pit mine. Upon discovering silver, he uses dynamite to expand the hole. However, after the explosion, Daniel re-enters the hole and accidentally trips, resulting in a broken leg. Despite the intense pain, he gathers some silver stones in his shirt and manages to climb out of the hole, dragging his injured leg. He then takes the silver sample to an assay office, where he receives a claim certificate for silver and gold. The narrative then fast-forwards to 1902. Daniel has discovered oil near Los Angeles and has set up his own drilling company to extract it. Unfortunately, a machinery accident leads to the death of one of his workers, leaving a baby boy orphaned. Daniel adopts the boy, whom he names H.W. Plainview. Over time, H.W. becomes Daniel's nominal business partner. This allows Daniel to portray himself as a family man to potential investors, earning their trust. Together, they travel from town to town, delivering heartfelt speeches and urging investors to lease their land for drilling. When asked about his wife, Daniel's standard response is that she passed away during childbirth in 1911. Daniel Plainview is approached by a young man named Paul Sunday who discloses the existence of an oil deposit beneath his family's property in Little Boston, California. Intrigued, Daniel seeks more details, but Paul demands a payment of $500 for the information. Once Daniel meets his demand, Paul reveals the exact location of his family's ranch. In the following scene, Daniel and his adopted son, H.W., visit the area under the guise of a quail hunting expedition. Upon their arrival at the ranch, they are warmly welcomed by Paul's father, Abel, who offers them water and goat milk. As they set up their camp, they are visited by Eli, Paul's twin brother and a local preacher, who promises to bring them dinner under the pretense of quail hunting. During their exploration of the area, Daniel and H.W. discover oil, confirming Paul's claim. Daniel sees the potential of the location for building a pipeline, reaching the beach, and striking a deal with Union Oil. He explains to H.W. that owning this land would eliminate their need for railroads and shipping, thereby saving them a significant amount of money. Later, over dinner, Daniel privately expresses his desire to purchase their land to Abel and Eli. When Eli questions his intentions, Daniel responds that he enjoys quail hunting and that the fresh air is beneficial for his ailing son. Daniel initially offers a minimal amount for the land, but Eli, aware of the oil and the land's drilling potential, demands $10,000 for his church. Daniel eventually negotiates a deal for $5,000, payable only once the well begins production, and includes the quails in the agreement. The following day, Daniel visits a real estate agent to inquire about the landowners surrounding the Sundays, intending to purchase their lands as well. He also contacts his business partner, requesting him to bring their entire workforce to the site to commence work immediately. While Daniel is engrossed in his ambitious project, H.W. starts spending time with Mary, Abel's youngest daughter, who is the same age as him. During their interactions, H.W. learns that Mary's father punishes her if she doesn't pray, and he later shares this information with Daniel. In due course, the camp tents are erected, and the construction of the drilling site gradually commences. Daniel manages to acquire all the available land around the Sunday property, except a parcel owned by a man named William Bandy. William expresses a desire to meet Daniel in person, but Daniel, suspecting it to be a ploy to extract more money from him, decides to ignore him for the time being. One day, Daniel addresses the local community, explaining how oil drilling will spur the development of the entire region. He pledges to construct schools, wells, roads, and promote agriculture in the area, thereby creating job opportunities for everyone. After several days of construction, the drilling site is nearly ready. On the day of inauguration, Daniel delivers a brief speech with Mary and H.W. by his side, but he doesn't permit Eli to perform his quick blessing. H.W. then officially commences the drilling process by pulling the lever. Following this, Daniel organizes a feast for all the residents to celebrate the occasion. During the celebration, he assures Mary, in Abel's presence, that her father will not harm her anymore. However, the same night, a tragedy strikes. A large rod slips from a worker's hands and strikes another employee inside the well, resulting in his immediate death. Upon learning about this unfortunate incident, Daniel reprimands his workers for their lack of safety measures. He then collects the deceased man's belongings in a chest and prepares for his burial. The next morning, Daniel visits Eli, who is in the midst of delivering a sermon that seems quite intense. After the sermon, Daniel requests Eli to say a prayer in memory of his deceased employee. While Eli agrees, he expresses his concern about the workers operating on an unblessed well. However, Daniel insists that his workers should rest during their free time instead of attending church. A few days later, a gas leak leads to a massive explosion. HW is present at the site during the incident, but Daniel manages to rescue him before the site is engulfed in flames. He takes him to a tent and checks on him, only to find that the boy has lost his hearing due to the loud blast. The fire also results in the collapse of the entire drilling infrastructure. The following day, as the fire continues, Daniel uses dynamite to displace the burning fuel and oxygen from the fuel source, effectively putting out the fire. That night, he sleeps holding his son, who continually hums as he can't hear his own voice. In the subsequent days, HW spends most of his time in bed, showing signs of depression. Seeing this, Daniel decides to hire a teacher from the city to help him cope with his disability. One day, Eli confronts Daniel in front of his workers, demanding the money he is still owed. Already grappling with mounting issues, Daniel loses his temper and slaps Eli, humiliating him publicly. He berates him for failing to heal his son, despite his claims of being a preacher. In a fit of rage, he drags Eli by his hair and throws him into a pool of oil, sternly warning him not to ask for money again. Later, during dinner, Eli criticizes his father for his blind trust in Daniel, labeling him as a fool. When his father attempts to reason with him, Eli loses his temper and throws him off the table. A few days later, a stranger arrives at Daniel's doorstep, introducing himself as Henry Plainview, Daniel's half-brother. Initially skeptical, Daniel is convinced when Henry presents a letter from their sister, which mentions their father's death 3 months prior. Invited inside, the brothers engage in a conversation where Henry admits to his past attempts at drilling, albeit without the success that Daniel has achieved. He also confesses to having served time in prison due to some trouble he got into. After putting his son to bed, Daniel steps outside to continue his conversation with Henry, this time questioning his true intentions for showing up. Henry responds by asserting that he is not seeking money or favors but simply wishes to work with Daniel. They spend the evening together, sharing drinks and reminiscing about their past, although Daniel keeps many details to himself. Meanwhile, HW starts to feel jealous, believing that Daniel will now prioritize Henry over him. In a fit of jealousy, he sets their house on fire, intending to kill Henry while he sleeps. However, his plan fails as both Henry and Daniel wake up in time to extinguish the fire. Seeing this, HW attempts to flee, but Daniel manages to bring him back. The next day, Daniel takes HW on a train under the pretense of a joint trip, but in reality, he is sending HW to a special boarding school. As the train is about to leave, Daniel excuses himself and disembarks, leaving HW alone on the train. In the following scene, Daniel and Henry meet with representatives from Standard Oil who express their interest in buying out Daniel's entire business and land. They offer him a substantial sum of money, suggesting that he could retire and spend the rest of his life with his son. Feeling insulted by the offer from Standard Oil, Daniel rejects it outright and storms off to continue his work. He frequently inquires about his son's well-being and adjustment to city life from his workers. As time progresses, Daniel negotiates a deal with Union Oil to construct a pipeline to the California coast. However, a problem arises: they do not own the last piece of land, which belongs to William. Daniel attempts to resolve this issue by visiting William's house but finds that he is away on vacation. Subsequently, Daniel and Henry collaborate to map out a route for the pipeline by marking specific locations around the land with metal stakes. After hours of hard work, the brothers take a break to swim in the ocean and relax on the beach. During this time, Daniel shares some anecdotes from their past, but Henry's failure to recognize a local joke raises Daniel's suspicions. Later, while camping in the forest, Daniel confronts Henry, holding him at gunpoint and demanding an explanation for his presence. Under duress, Henry confesses that he is an imposter who met the real Henry in King City. They had worked together on a farm and became fast friends. According to him, the real Henry had expressed a desire to visit his brother but lacked the necessary funds for travel. Years later, the impostor was diagnosed with tuberculosis, which ultimately claimed his life. He had learned about Henry's life by reading his personal journal and impersonated him in the hopes of securing employment from Daniel. Despite promising to leave and never return, an infuriated Daniel shoots him dead and buries his body. Following this, Daniel reads his brother's diary and breaks down in tears. The next morning, he is awakened by William, who seems to be aware of the crime he committed the previous night. William insists that Daniel publicly repent and undergo baptism at Eli's church as the only condition for allowing the pipeline to cross his land. With no other options, Daniel agrees to the terms for the sake of his project. William then escorts him to the church, where Eli, as part of the baptism ceremony, humiliates him and coerces him into confessing that he abandoned his son. Eli also announces to the congregation that Daniel will be making a substantial donation to the church, an announcement that Daniel cannot refute. From that point forward, the pipeline's construction proceeds without any further issues. In addition to this, Daniel brings H.W. back and apologizes for his earlier abandonment. A teacher accompanies the boy to continue his sign language education. One afternoon, Daniel and his son dine at a restaurant where they encounter the same representatives from Standard Oil. Unable to resist, Daniel brags about his lucrative deal with Union Oil. Meanwhile, Eli departs to carry out his missionary work. The narrative then leaps forward to 1927. H.W., now an adult, marries Mary. Daniel, who has amassed a significant fortune, resides in a large mansion with numerous servants. However, his solitary lifestyle has led him to alcoholism and depression. One evening, H.W., accompanied by his interpreter, visits Daniel for a private discussion. He begins by expressing his deep love for Daniel but admits that he misses fieldwork. Consequently, he has decided to relocate to Mexico with Mary to start his own drilling company. This news infuriates Daniel, who views this move as creating competition. In a fit of drunken anger, Daniel mocks H.W.'s deafness and reveals the harsh truth: H.W. is not his son, but an orphan he used to enhance his business image. This revelation devastates H.W., who walks away after declaring that he is relieved there is no blood relation between them. Overwhelmed by depression and alcohol, Daniel falls asleep in his bowling alley. The following day, Daniel is roused from his sleep by Eli, who has now become a radio preacher. As they converse, Eli repeatedly brings up their familial ties, which stirs Daniel's ire. Eli informs him about William's recent demise and that the property rights have now been transferred to William's grandson. Since the grandson is a member of the church, Eli offers to mediate and sell the property to Daniel. Daniel agrees, but only if Eli admits to being a false prophet and denies the existence of God. When Daniel proposes a sum of $100,000, Eli consents and echoes the statement, mirroring the confession he had forced Daniel to make in the church earlier. However, Daniel then coldly discloses that the property is now worthless as his adjacent wells have already tapped into the same oil reservoir. This revelation reduces Eli to tears, leading him to admit that he lost all his money in the 1920 stock market crash and has strayed morally. He begs Daniel for assistance, but Daniel shows no sympathy. Instead, he taunts him by declaring that Paul is the true chosen one, who has now become a successful businessman. When Eli pleads with him to stop, Daniel hurls him into the bowling alley and launches several bowling balls at him. Although Eli manages to dodge the balls, a drunken Daniel chases him down and knocks him over with a bowling pin. In a ruthless assault, Daniel repeatedly strikes him on the head until he dies. Upon hearing the commotion, a servant comes to check, and Daniel announces that he is finished. Here the movie ends. Thanks for watching.